everybody. Welcome to episode 9 of the Paddy and the Yank podcast. How we doing, Paddy?
I'm doing very good, Yank. You know why?
Why?
'Cause it's a beautiful day.
It's not.
To me, it is. It's pouring
not a
down
beautiful
rain
day.
outside.
We
The
differ
rain-
on movies like we differ on the fucking weather.
I love the rain. I
Yeah.
love the rain. It relaxes me. It calms me down. It gets my mind thinking in a creative way. It's probably because I grew up in the west of Ireland where it rained non-stop. And it still does rain non-stop.
I come from a dead state with gray trees and flat cornfields that die in the winter.
Really? What's the weather like where you come from?
Well, it changes, right? We legitimately have 4 seasons. For anybody listening, Taiwan kind of has 2.
Ireland has one. Winter. Yeah.
Taiwan is like rainy and cold and rainy and hot. I don't know. There's not really 4 specific.
No, Taiwan's summer is very long. It's almost like 6 months of intense heat and humidity. Yeah. Like I have to prepare myself for the summer here mentally. I have to be like, right, summer's coming. Okay.
I do find the summer draining. But back home we got 4 seasons, spring, summer, winter, fall. I thought that's the way it was everywhere. So winter's pretty nice. It's not humid. It's just hot. It's nice. It's very enjoyable to go outside.
Yep.
And the winter, it can be snowy, but everything dies, so it's really depressing. Everybody gets seasonal affection disorder. That's not what it's called. Oh, my God. Seasonal affective disorder, where you get depressed in the winter.
You're very right there, Yank. Everything
Did I get it right?
Everything dies.
Everything dies.
Everything dies.
Everything does die. I still want to do a podcast on Bhutan. They
And
meditate on death every day.
You know what else?
Yes.
Everybody hurts sometimes.
Living in America. Oh, I can't do it. Yeah, that's why I'm not a singer.
So, Yank, I want to jump into today's podcast by telling you a tale. And this is a tale about gold, treasure, blood,
Like
and
pirates.
the executioner's rope. Actually, not about pirates,
Ooh,
no.
I like executioner's rope. That sounds
I don't know why I
interesting.
said it like a pirate, but it's not about pirates, no. But recently I started watching or rewatching an old TV show called Time Team. And Time Team was a show that was out in the 90s, and basically what it was, I guess you could call it, I don't know if you'd call it a reality show. It was more like a documentary sort of reality show. And basically this crew would go to, like, let's say, archaeological sites, and they would do a dig. They would be like, right, there was a Roman settlement around here in like however many 100 years ago. And we believe that in this area, there might be remains, there could be pottery, there could be old walls of the city, and they would dig, and they would have however many days to do their dig and see what they could find. It was a fascinating show. I used to love watching it, and we used to watch it with my family on a Sunday. It had a very distinctive theme song at the beginning, and I was watching this recently, and it got me thinking about a story that I heard as a young guy growing up in the west of Ireland, and it was about a very famous highwayman.
All right, clarify what a highwayman is.
Okay, so for anybody out there that doesn't know what a highwayman is basically a bandit or a thief who robs people on horseback. And they were operating from like the 16th to the early 19th century. Now in Ireland, back then they would call them a highwayman or a rapparee. And I think rapparee comes from the Gaelic word rapparee, which basically means thruster or stabber, or the wielder of a pike or a half pike. Now a pike was a long weapon. It was almost like a spear. So it would have a long wooden handle and it would have a sharp blade on the end of it. And I guess the half pike was, like a half version of that. Basically cut the stick in half or something, I guess, So, these highwaymen, they would mainly go around on the, the roads, the back roads, and they would rob people traveling on these roads, like carriages, coaches, post boys who would be carrying the mail. So these highwaymen, they would hold up, carriages that were carrying valuables and stuff like that, and they wouldn't think for a moment about using violence to get what they wanted, but a lot of the times they would try to get away without having to use violence. So highwaymen were often romanticized as gentlemen of the road. And I guess there's actually a long history of people treating highwaymen or certain thieves like that as heroes, like let's say Robin Hood type characters.
This is a very specific archetype. And I keep trying to find things in my head to associate it with, because we definitely have American things that are very, very similar.
I was fascinated by things like this growing up, like Jesse James,
Okay,
the
that's what
Wild
I'm trying
West.
to remember right now. I think I'm trying to remember cowboys.
The reason a lot of times too that these highwaymen would be, romanticized or seen as heroes amongst the poor and the lower classes, because a lot of the time, most of the time, these bandits would only target the well-to-do and the wealthy upper-class people, and Oftentimes they would spread the wealth or their plunder amongst the poorer communities. And this worked to their benefit, because the poorer communities then would keep a watch out for them. They'd tip them off if there was, patrols looking for them. They'd give them safe haven when they were on the run, stuff like that. I guess it's very similar in more modern times to a guy like Pablo Escobar, because Pablo Escobar pumped millions of dollars into the poor communities in Colombia, in places like Medellin and Bogota. Now, he built like houses, he built football pitches all over the place. He done this obviously to help the poor, but also knowing that he was building an allegiance and he was building loyalty among the poor communities. So when Pablo Escobar went on the run many times, he was often sheltered by the poorer people. And that's why it was so hard for the government to catch him and so hard for people to actually track him down. He was always getting help along the way, every step of the way, the poorer people. To this day, in Colombia, a lot of people still have a picture of Pablo Escobar in their houses. The poorer people that he would have maybe built houses for and stuff like that. They still worship Pablo Escobar today in the same way that they did back in the day. Even though he's responsible for like thousands of people dying.
In North Korea, they still worship Kim Jong-un, so that's not saying a lot.
Yeah, I get. But what has Kim Jong-un done for fucking the poor people in Korea?
They don't know what he has or has not done because they're so fucking oblivious.
Yeah, I guess they're so fucking
So
brainwashed.
in that aspect, Pablo Escobar is quite different from Frank White, because Frank White was selling the drugs to the culture he was living in. Pablo Escobar was exporting all that cocaine to America, right?
Yeah.
So he was ruining Americans' lives sort of to contribute to his own people.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, it's pretty similar to a Highwayman, right?
Pablo Escobar was still viewed amongst a lot of the poor there as a Robin Hood type of character.
Yeah. Screw the rich, save the poor.
The same thing is in the case with Captain Gallagher, the highwayman I'm going to tell you about today. Now, Captain Gallagher was an Irish highwayman who led a group of bandits in the hills, mountains, bogs and rivers of the Irish countryside.
What's a bog? I'm sorry. Is that like a swamp?
A bog is where we cut turf or peat.
Peat is what you use to make whiskey.
They age whiskey with peat, but in Ireland, we burn peat in the fire. We burn turf in the fire.
Is it like moss?
Every Irish person that's listening to this is probably they're getting flashbacks of working in the bog as a kid. So the bog is it's like a marshy area of land, and it's supposedly, or I think what a bog is, it's dead trees that died millions of years ago, and it all builds up in the ground. And what happens is when it's wet, they bring in a machine and they cut lines of this turf. We call it turf. And then when it warms up, the turf dries. People take the turf out of the ground and they foot the turf. They turn the turf over to let it dry. Okay, it dries under the sun, that we don't get much of anyways. And then they stack it. It's called footing. They foot the turf and they stack it in piles. It dries out, and then what they do is they bag it. Everybody goes up there. I done it many times as a kid. You'd go to the bog and you'd take all the turf. It's like long pieces like this, and you put it in bags and you stack all the bags, and then a tractor will come up in a trailer and you throw all the bags into the back of the trailer. The trailer goes down and tips it off in a shed somewhere like that, and then you burn this over the winter in your fire.
Oh, so it wasn't a job. It was something you were doing for heat?
Yeah, something you would do to heat your house.
I was picturing it as like, in the U.S., like our first job is McDonald's, or at least it was for me. I thought maybe you were saying this was the first job for like teenage Irish people.
No, but this is one of the first bits of labour a lot of young Irish people would have done was going to the bog to get the turf for the family. Now, people I'm sure would still sell turf and stuff like that, but it's got a very distinct smell to it. Very distinct smell to it.
Like peat.
It is peat.
It is peat.
Yeah, it's peat. Yeah,
I don't like peaty whiskey.
They can age whiskey with the peat. So anyways, yeah, Captain Gallagher and his crew of bandits, they operated in the hills, bogs, rivers and mountains of the Irish countryside in a place called County Mayo in the west of Ireland. They operated around the late 1700s to the early 1800s, and him and his gang, they began like raiding, the mail coaches on the high roads, as well as the British landowners. Now, it was Captain Gallagher's attacks on the landowners that were the most widely known and that gained him and his crew the most fame and the most notoriety. Well, you see, because back then in Ireland at that time, the whole country would have been patrolled by British soldiers and controlled by the English gentry, and it was just riven with poverty. It would have been a rough, rugged, and, to be honest, an extremely harsh environment to exist in or to have grown up in. Especially if you were a poor Irish tenant farmer who had his land and his home taken off him by the invading, colonising Brits. So basically what would have happened back then is like, there was a guy called Cromwell. He came to Ireland and he just fucking decimated the fucking country, like murdered women, children, and threw all the Irish off their fucking land and planted English landowners there, right? So imagine you're an Irish farmer, right? This land and this farm might have been in your family for generations. And then all of a sudden, boom, these English fucking come over and they take your land and your house, they kick you off it, but then they say, oh, you know what, you can rent the land and work the land and pay us this rent. So you've had your land taken off you, and then you have to rent your own land back off these fucking Brits.
Yeah,
that's what the scenario was back then.
Sounds like what's happened to indigenous peoples everywhere.
There you go. That's what happens most of the time when people colonize, isn't it? You know.
Yeah. Would the indigenous of Ireland? Damn, I'm not even sure how to ask this question. Would the indigenous version of people in Ireland be Gaelic people?
Yeah, we would have been Gaels, yeah.
Yeah, Gaels.
Gaels, yeah.
Oh, Gaels.
Gaels, yeah. We were Gaels, yeah.
I never knew that.
Yep. And so you can understand that there would have been a lot of hate and contempt for these British landlords,
Absolutely.
these British invaders, you know.
Absolutely.
So when a guy like Captain Gallagher comes along and he's robbing these guys and giving back to the poor, you know what I mean? You can see how they could build admiration and loyalty for a guy like this.
Like Hitler.
No.
Well, I mean, like, after World War One,
yeah,
Germany was broken, hopeless, and desperate.
Yeah.
And this dude comes up who's seemingly confident and is saying, "Oh, this is the answer," and everybody's broken. They're drowning in despair, and so they're like, "Yeah, all right, we're in." You don't see the relation.
No, not at all. Not at all. I might just cut them out. Hitler and a guy we've got the invading Brits who's taking the guy's land and making them pay all their rent and treating them like shit. And then you got a guy, Captain Gallagher, who's going around robbing these guys and then giving some money back and giving some hope to the poor people.
Hitler gave hope to Germany. I mean, I don't think anybody could disagree with that. Like, that's what he was doing. He was giving people hope for the future. Like, yes, we got fucked in World War One, but we're coming back. And that was kind of the speech he was giving them, because they were in a serious depression. They were in serious poverty. They had nothing because they had to pay all the money out for losing World War One.
So when guys like Captain Gallagher and his bandits were robbing these invaders and, you know, sharing the spoils amongst the poorer people that would have been kicked off their land, they were highly admired and highly supported. And they also tried to protect some of the poor Irish peasants that were bullied by the British landlords. And in fact, there's one very famous story of an incident in which Captain Gallagher and his men, they raided the home of an extremely mean and unpopular landlord in a place called Killlasser. And during the raid, they discovered over half a dozen eviction notices. So this fucking son of a bitch landlord had written up all these eviction notices, you know, to hand out to these poor tenant farmers, basically kicking them off the land, saying, you're done, whatever. And Captain Gallagher and his group of men had raided this guy's house, and when they were in there, they found all these fucking eviction notices. So what they done was, at gunpoint, they forced this landlord to eat every single one of the eviction notices before they fled his house with a bounty of silver and all kinds of other valuables. Stories like this were floating around, and the people were just being drawn to, you know, a guy like Captain Gallagher. And Captain Gallagher and his crew, they were famous for carrying a gun called a blunderbuss. Now, a blunderbuss was basically an early version of a shotgun. So, like, you know, the end of the barrel widened out, almost like, for me to give you like an exaggerated version, you know, like a gramophone. You know, like a gramophone, like the speaker of a gramophone.
No, I'm not sure what a gramophone is.
A gramophone is like, you know, like an old vinyl player, and it has like this big horn. It's like a big horn. So it's or even a trumpet.
Really, that not that exaggerated. There's a gun. There's a name for that kind of gun.
A blunderbuss.
There's another name I'm familiar with. I can't remember, but it's something similar. I think it starts with a P. I don't know. I'd have to search it.
Okay.
I think it was the gun the Brits used when they were coming to the U.S. in like the 1700s.
Really?
Was that around the same time?
This would have been 1700s. Yes, it would have been. Yeah. Also, this gun I think was used a lot of the times on pirate ships. Let's say two ships were out at sea, you know, having a battle. Cannons were firing, and people were going to They were going to sling their hooks and make it over onto the other ship. When they'd swing across, if somebody had a blunderbuss on the other side, it would spray out the shot like a shotgun, and you'd be able to hit a lot of people. At long distance, the blunderbuss wouldn't have been very good or wouldn't have been very accurate, but in close quarters, it would have been very effective. So Gallagher and his crew were famous for carrying these blunderbuss weapons. You can imagine back then that Captain Gallagher and his crew were a big thorn in the side for these British landlords and these patrolling British soldiers that were, you know, roaming around the Irish countryside. Let me say that again, the Irish countryside. notified. You know, none of them felt safe. Like, they were on watch the whole time, these landlords and stuff like that. You know, now as much as Gallagher and these highwaymen were admired, you know, by a lot of the poor people, sometimes they were feared as well. You know, a lot of the times they were feared. And in one instance, there's a story of a woman, and she was bringing her last cow to the local mart. You know, like the local mart where they sell livestock and whatever like that. She brought the cow there to sell it in order that she could pay her rent. This was her last cow. And on her way home, she was rushing home down this road, right? And out in front of her, this guy appeared, this shadow appeared. And she was startled and she was shocked. And the guy said, where are you going in such a hurry? And she said, oh, I just came from the mart. I had to sell my last cow in order to pay my rent. But I want to get home before dark because I'm afraid Captain Gallagher and his men might rob me on the road. And the guy started laughing. And he gave her the price of the cow she just sold and the price of her rent. And he gave her a wink. This is the story. He gave her a wink and a smile and said, make sure you tell everybody Captain Gallagher is not the rogue everyone makes him out to be.
Nice.
And she headed off home. So, you know, there was a lot of good stories about it. Gallagher and his men, they were so bold, courageous and skillful that they managed to survive in this, you know, perilous trade of theirs for over 2 decades. Wow. So for over 2 decades, man, they were, you know, they were highwaymen.
It's probably much easier during this time period.
100%. No phones.
Right.
No cameras.
Right.
Like, they rob a stagecoach on the road. Like, how long does it take before the soldiers are notified? They could be gone, hiding out in the woods, hiding out in the mountains. They would have had loads of hideaway places. They knew the lay of the land very, very well. You know what I mean?
There was a famous cowboy who was like really good at robbing banks, getting away, and he was so good because he would ride a horse from one town to another town, and then that next town there'd be like another horse waiting. Because the first horse would get too tired or something. He'd jump off that horse and get on another horse. Oh. And like, you really had to have your shit very strategically planned out during this time period to be successful.
Back then it was like, man, look at Bonnie and Clyde. They were on the run for so long.
Yeah.
It's like a phone call might come in like, oh, we seen Bonnie and Clyde down in Texas. And it's like, by the time they send people or get people to where that something happened, Bonnie and Clyde could be in a completely different state.
You said the movie The Highwayman is about the cops that chased Bonnie and Clyde, right?
Yeah, I believe. I never watched it.
It wasn't very good. I love Woody Harrelson.
Well, I imagined it wouldn't be good. You know, I'm just saying, I was always a big fan of Bonnie and Clyde growing up as a kid. Any of these outlaws. I was brought up on that Ned Kelly. Wait till I tell you about Ned Kelly, the Australian bushranger, on one of the podcasts. That's a great topic I want to talk to you about one day. He was like, let's say he was the equivalent of a highwayman, but he was Australian, and they called them bushrangers in Australia. Ned Kelly, prepare yourself for that story, right?
Okay.
But yeah, I was always fascinated. I went to actually Las Vegas in America to see Bonnie and Clyde's car that they died in, that they got shot up in. That car.
I thought they drove it off a cliff.
No, you're thinking of the movie Thelma and Louise.
I am. Good job.
Bonnie and Clyde's car is currently sitting in an exhibition in a casino called Whiskey Pete's on the way into Las Vegas. The car looks exactly like it did that back then. The bullet holes, it's riddled with fucking bullet holes. They've got Clyde Barrow's bloody shirt, and they got a lot of things that were in the car are on display there. They also have an Al Capone car. Now, what fascinated me about, I mean, this was like something I'd imagined since I was a kid, seeing that car, and then I'm standing in front of it looking at it, was Clyde Barrow's shirt was very small. He was a very small man. Very, very small man. Clyde Barrow was Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie Parker was the girl, and Clyde Barrow was the guy. But the shirt was still stained with blood. It was very interesting, you know. But I was always drawn to these outlaws, you know, these outlaw figures.
I could say I was raised by an outlaw. So
myself too, in one way.
I grew up in the biker culture, so naturally I had a respect for bikers.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get much more. They are the modern day outlaw in the U.S., right?
Yeah.
They
there
couldn't.
you go.
And there was the result of like soldiers coming home after World War II and being so used to excitement and violence and guns and going fast that they just couldn't stop, and they started riding fucking Harleys. And then that's it, pretty much.
Most of these highwaymen were ex-military.
No shit.
Yes, they were.
Wow.
They had fought in different wars against the British in Ireland and in Scotland, and after that they just became highwaymen.
It's funny, right?
It's very, very interesting that you made that comparison. So yeah, so Gallagher and his men, they were doing this for over 2 decades. They were doing this for over 2 decades, tormenting these British landlords, and, you know, good for them. Fuck those
tormenting
fuck
or giving
those
them
British landlords.
giving them what they deserved.
Exactly, you know. So I mean, Jesus, 2 decades
Fucking
doing
Brits,
this.
We should call them the shits.
There's also some pretty interesting little sayings or quotes that originated from the times of the Highwaymen. And I'll tell them to you now. So some of these quotes or some of these sayings first appeared in court records dating from like the mid 18th century, and it was regarding highwaymen. So when highwaymen would rob people on the highway, they'd shout, "Stand and deliver your money," which then turned into "Stand and deliver." And another one of these was "Your money or your life." So these little sayings that you still hear today, you see these things in movies, modern day movies and shit. They originated from the highwayman back in the day. You're fucking riding your carriage along the way. Two guys come out in front of you, two guys out the side of you, pistols drawn, flintlocks cocked, and they go, "Your money or your life." Boom. You know, it's pretty
Makes
fucking
me
cool.
think of give me liberty or give me death, and I cannot remember who said that. Some sort of I don't know, some sort of revolutionary in the probably early 1800s.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, give me liberty or give me death.
During the whole time of like the Boston Tea Party, like that era.
Okay. So yeah, so anyways, like most good things, they must come to an end. And Gallagher's fortune and his luck would run out in 1818. So according to legend, Gallagher was hiding out in a local house while he was recovering from some kind of illness. He was sick and he was hiding out in the mountains of some, I guess, house of people he trusted. And the people that were hiding him, they were feeding him and they were giving him meals. But what they'd done is that they laced the food with a thing called poaching.
Oh.
Now, do you know what poaching is?
No, poaching.
So poaching is like Irish moonshine. Poaching is very famous in Ireland. It's moonshine and they call it poteen or poaching. It's illegal in Ireland. It can be anywhere from 40% to 90% alcohol.
Okay. We have moonshine in the US as well.
Very, very
It
similar.
can make you go blind.
This shit's the
Yeah.
same. Like they make it, I think there's still a few places in Ireland, like some of the islands that make poaching. I remember my owl fella when I was younger.
Your what?
My owl fella.
Owl fella?
Okay, in Ireland we call our father our owl fella.
Owl fella?
Yeah, or the owl one.
Uh,
The owl one would be the owl lady. Or your owl lady is
hold
your...
on. The owl one?
Okay, so in Ireland, your owl fella is your old man, your father.
Oh, I keep thinking you're saying alpha. Sounds similar to alpha.
Your old fella.
Is that what you're saying? Old fella?
Yeah, but old fella, AULD.
So with like a Gaelish accent.
Yeah, and
Comes out owl fella.
your mother would be referred to as your owl lady.
Owl.
Yeah, my owl lady. I can't.
Okay, bikers say old lady.
Okay, no, we say my owl lady, my
Okay.
old lady.
But it's not derogatory. But if I called my girlfriend, "That's my old lady," she would probably get offended. But in the U.S., it's like a pretty...
Yeah, okay, I'm not sure.
More so for bikers to say.
Yeah, so we refer to our father as our owl fella and your mother as your owl lady.
Huh. Owl fella.
Yeah, in Ireland. So, yeah, so my owl fella, when I was younger, I remember he would get his hands on poaching pretty often, like, but that turns people into lunatics, man. Like, if you were to drink 2 shots of that poaching that they had when I was growing up, you'd be out of your mind. 2 shots, you'd be out of your mind.
I don't even think I can drink straight liquor anymore. It still sends me out of my mind.
And also, anything that people are buying in Ireland, in airports or anything like that, that's labelled poaching or poaching, it's not real poaching, no. No.
Yeah, they marketed an alcohol in the U.S. actually called moonshine that you can buy in the grocery stores now. But I don't think it's like the moonshine I used to get in West Virginia, where like some old fucking hippie be all burnt out with a beard, be walking around with like 12 jars of Newberry. You want a jar of moonshine, man? Like, this dude's got the real shit. Let's go. I'll take 5.
Fuck yeah! So poaching is like moonshine, Irish moonshine. Yeah. So anyways, like I said, according to the legend, Gallagher was hiding out in this house, recovering from an illness, and the people that were harbouring him, they were lacing his food with poaching. So eventually he passed out, right? And as soon as he passed out, the family got to work. And they put him in a bed, or what they call a cailach. That's Gaelic, I guess. Cailach. A bed beside the fire. They tied his fucking hands and his ankles with rope. And they sent a message to the Redcoats in a town called Foxford. And the Redcoats were the British.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, the fucking Redcoats. They wore red fucking army coats.
I think we called them the same thing in the U.S.
Yeah. Fucking Redcoats. And in Scotland as well. The Redcoats were in Scotland. So anyways, tied him to the bed. He was passed out. And they sent a message to the Redcoats in a town called Foxford. And then they alerted the Redcoats in Ballina, in a town called Swinford, in Castlebar. So all these units started communicating, saying, fucking Captain Gallagher's got a location on him. So Captain Gallagher was already fucking tied up when they got to the house. So there's conflicting stories, right? Some people say, and legend says, that the family in the house done that they laced his food with poaching, they tied him up, and then the Brits came and they got him. But the other story is that one of the neighbours had seen Captain Gallagher entering the house, and he was loyal to the British. He was like a spy or whatever like that, and he ratted him out. So when the Brits came, the Redcoats came, 200 of them surrounded the fucking house, and Captain Gallagher not wanting to, like, he was already sick, he was recovering from an illness, and him not wanting to put the lives of the family that was helping him out in danger, he surrendered peacefully, right?
Shame.
Yeah, I know, man. Oh, it was fucking...
I was waiting for a much better story.
Yeah, I mean,
thinking of the Devil's Rejects right now, where they like go out guns blazing, you know.
Well, I mean, Captain Gallagher had been in a lot of skirmishes and shootouts and close call escapes with the Brits over the years, like many situations like that where he escaped by the skin of his teeth. But in this instance, I guess he was sick, so sick that he basically gave up.
Yeah, I could see that.
Well, he basically went in quietly. So what they done was they took him away to Castlebar, which was a big town at the time, a place called Castlebar in Mayo, and they had like a hasty trial. You know, it would have been a sham trial. You know, it would have been like, you fucking guilty. You know what I mean? There's he's not getting out of this. Captain Gallagher, he's done. So he was sentenced to death. They sentenced Captain Gallagher to death by hanging. Now, on the day that Captain Gallagher was being hung, he pleaded with his executioners and like let's say the leader of this group of redcoats, and he promised them that if they spared his life, he would lead them to where he had buried his treasure, under a rock in a place called Ballylyra Woods. Now, the people that his captors, the Brits, the Redcoats, they didn't fall for this ploy, and they went ahead with the execution. Now, they say that Captain Gallagher died fearfully, like he was scared, and you can imagine, you're up in the gallows about to be hung by your neck. So they hung him and his secretary, a guy called Walsh. I don't really know who he was. And Walsh and Captain Gallagher up on the gallows, they shook hands and they kissed, and they were flung off together.
Who kissed?
Captain Gallagher and his secretary Welsh.
And his secretary was a guy.
Yeah, but I mean, they didn't fucking kiss romantically, I'm guessing. It was just like,
Can you kiss me the way they kiss? I want to see what this is. A non-romantic, non-homosexual kiss. Show me what this looks like.
This was back in the 1800s, Yank. This is the modern
men
day. So
kissed each other.
Go fuck yourself. Get your girlfriend to fucking kiss you. God damn it, your girlfriend ain't kissing you enough.
I don't think she's going to kiss me today.
Anyways, not to take away from this fucking swashbuckling story, we're coming to the climax here.
I'm sorry,
Yank.
that caught me off guard.
So anyways, they flung Captain Gallagher and Walsh off the gallows. Walsh died immediately, but Captain Gallagher's rope broke and he slammed to the fucking ground. He crashed to the ground and he broke both his fucking legs. So what they done is that they dragged him from the bottom of the fucking gallows, broken legs, up onto the top of the platform. Supposedly, there's a couple of different stories. One says they tied him to a chair and they gave him a glass of wine, and he still said, like, I have lots of loot and treasure and plunder buried in this woods. Like, if you let me live, if you spare my life, I will show you where it is. I will take you to it if you guarantee my life. And they said no, and they fucking hung him. And that was the end of Captain Gallagher. But what happened...
Wait a second. He fell, he broke his legs, they brought him up, gave him a glass of wine.
Yeah.
And then what?
Then hung him again.
And
And this time he died, yeah. So the rope broke the first time. The first time they hung him, the rope broke, and he broke both his legs. But he still said to them, look, please, like, he was pleading for his life. I have a lot of shit buried in these woods. A lot of shit. You know what I mean? Let me live. Guarantee my life, and I'll take you there, and I'll show you exactly where it is.
Yeah.
Some people think that he was doing that to buy time and hoping that his group of bandits, that weren't apprehended, would be waiting in ambush there in the woods and try to, do a daring break or a prison escape or whatever you want to call it. Now, as soon as the Captain Gallagher was hung, as soon as the business of the day was taken care of, this fucking group of fucking redcoats under their commander, they went straight to Ballylyra Woods and they searched for his treasure. Now, the thing about it is, Captain Gallagher said it was buried 7 foot from the river under a big rock. Now, when the Brits got there, they realized that there was thousands of rocks in this woods and this forest.
Oh.
So when I first heard this story, it fucking fascinated me and it intrigued me so much that I happened to be back in Ireland. I was back in Ireland visiting, and my brother was back at the same time, and we were talking about this story, right? And we love history. We love, shipwrecks, buried treasure, all this kind of stuff. What did? We went online. We ordered a metal detector. A metal detector did not arrive at the front door of the house. The doorbell went, and when I answered the door, there was a huge box And I was like, oh, I guess this is the metal detector, but I would have imagined it would have came in a long box. You know what I mean?
I would too.
A long. And when the guy handed it to me, it was fucking super heavy. I was like, okay, he said sign here. And I was like, okay. I'm like, this is going to be interesting. I went into the living room and I opened the box, and it was a brand new leather horse saddle. And I shouted upstairs, it's like, did anybody order a fucking horse saddle? And they're like, what the fuck? They're like, shut the fuck up. So my old lady came down, that's my mother, and my brother, and we looked at it like, and we pulled out this fucking brand new horse saddle. Like, what the fuck? I said to my brother, did you order a fucking metal detector or a horse saddle? He's like, I ordered a fucking metal detector. So we checked online and he'd ordered a metal detector. So what did we do? We sold the fucking horse saddle, and then we reordered a metal detector that they sent out to us for free.
I gotta be honest. I was expecting that to go a way different direction.
No.
That, you know what I was thinking?
Go
like,
on.
you ordered the metal detector.
Yeah.
And then, like, divine intervention. God was like, you don't need a metal detector. All you need is a horse, boy. And so you guys decided.
And the horse will lead you to the treasure.
And so you guys were like, well, God clearly doesn't want us to use a metal detector. He wants us to get horses and ride out there and find the treasure. So we got horses. And we went out there and we found the treasure.
So anyways, we eventually got our metal detector, and we tried to locate where Ballylyra Woods was. Because think about it, this was 200 years ago, right, when Captain Gallagher was around these parts. And the landscape has changed somewhat since then. So we had to go online, and we were trying to pinpoint where this woods was. So we ended up going there, and we found the little stream, what we believe was the little stream that was there at the time. And we were trying to imagine, okay, 7 foot from the riverbed or the riverbank is where the treasure is supposed to be buried, under a big rock. And there was a lot of fucking rocks out there. We spent the day out there. It was a beautiful sunny day, and we searched and searched. My brother dug holes like a madman. We were getting a lot of false readings on the metal detector. Now, to this day, this fascinates me. My brother told me not to do this podcast. More than once, he's called me and said, do not do that podcast. And you know why? Because he still wants to go out there and look for that fucking treasure. He thinks that if we put this podcast out, it's going to spark like some kind of crazy gold rush. But the Brits that went out there looking for Captain Gallagher's treasure after they hung him, they found a jewel-hilted sword. So all they found was one jewel-hilted sword. So that's like a sword with a very, ornate handle, emblazoned with rubies and all kinds of stones. They found just that. So either A, Captain Gallagher's treasure wasn't buried there at all, or B, his men had already gone, and taken it, or C, it's still there to this day. I believe it's still there.
Or D, his only treasure was that sword.
This guy was robbing people and raiding people for 20 years.
Yeah.
2 decades.
But he had shit everywhere.
He had stuff buried everywhere. Ireland. Do you know how much stuff there is buried in Ireland under the ground?
I don't.
Oh man, there has got to be so much treasure buried in Ireland. It's crazy. So we've got like so many monasteries in Ireland. We had the Vikings there. We had the Celts, the Gaels.
The
Druids. There's so much stuff buried in Ireland. But you know what? Fuck our government. Because it's against the law. Okay, here's basically what it says. It's against the law to engage in general searches for archaeological objects in Ireland using a metal detecting device, unless you have written permission or consent from the Minister of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht. The Gaeltacht is that. I told you the Gaeltacht is that school. The Gaeltacht is that school I told you about where everybody goes to speak Irish. You can only speak Gaelic there. You learn Gaelic. The Gaeltacht. And to do so without consent places you at risk of prosecution. So it's basically against the law to metal detect in Ireland. I say, what the fuck, man? Come on. You know what I mean? It's like metal detecting is such a buzz. You get such a buzz. We metal detected at an old mansion house. Let's say this place is, I won't say the name of it, but we discovered ammunition. We discovered rounds, spent rounds from the 1960s, the late 50s to 1960s, British rounds.
Oh shit.
Yeah. We dug them up out of the ground, and that was the thrill and the buzz out of that was fucking phenomenal.
My dad's side of the family is Indian.
Yep.
And my uncle would go out arrowhead hunting all the time. He would go out to freshly tilled fields and hunt them.
Yeah.
And hunt them. When I went to his house, dude, his whole house was just lined with arrowheads. And he said he had a few arrowheads in the bank because they were worth so much money.
That's so cool.
And every time I would go there, he'd give me a new arrowhead. Actually, I don't know where they are now, but I have a huge collection of arrowheads.
Yank, I request just even one of those arrowheads.
Yeah, I reckon I left them in a box at my mom's house or something.
Man, I love that kind of stuff. Fascinates me.
Mm.
It ignites the imagination, and it always has as a kid. You know, like digging up some kind of buried treasure. Like in England, there was that guy that was metal detecting. In England, I think basically the law is you ask the guy who owns the land, hey, do you mind if I metal detect on your land? Yeah, that's cool.
It's kind of like that with arrowheads too.
There you go. Anything I find, I'll give you half of. This guy was metal detecting with a very cheap, shitty ass metal detector, and he uncovered the biggest hoard, I think it was of Saxon or Norman gold that's ever been found. You're talking absolutely priceless. These guys got millions for this. There is so much stuff buried in Ireland, it's crazy. So anybody out there that's listening, Captain Gallagher's treasure is still out there somewhere, you know? My brother's going to hate me for saying that. He's going to be like, fuck him, why are you telling everybody about this treasure? But hey, you know, these stories are great. You know, it's like growing up watching movies like The Goonies or Indiana Jones, and then you hear stories about real people from your area that were doing stuff like this. That stuff is there, you know. I think it's great for the imagination. And so Captain Gallagher, Ireland's unsung highwayman heroes, what I'll call them.
All right.
Yeah, so that's my story today about Irish highwayman and Captain Gallagher and his lost treasure.
Very dope. Captain Gallagher.
Yeah, Captain Gallagher. I mean,
not Gallagher, Gallagher.
Okay, people in England pronounce it Gallagher, like Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher. You know, they're actually from Mayo in Ireland. They're actually from the same area as Captain Gallagher.
Who? I'm sorry.
Liam and Noel Gallagher from Oasis.
Their
grandmother and their mother and all their relations come from a place called Charlestown in County Mayo in Ireland.
Wow.
Yeah, but they pronounce the name Gallagher.
When sounds American.
We pronounce it Gallagher.
Yeah. We had a famous dude named Gallagher that would smash watermelons on stage. His whole job was just smashing fruit on a stage. That was it. He was famous for this.
With his head or what?
No, he'd take like these huge wooden hammers and like smash food, and then when he smashed it, it would squirt everybody in the audience. And the dude was like famous, like a very successful celebrity, and that was all he did.
Holy hell.
No, I don't think there was any stand-up comedy. He'd just smash fruit and shoot everybody. And that was it. That's the only Gallagher I can think of that I've ever heard of. Yeah.
That's some aspiration as a young fella.
Yeah.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
Fruit smasher.
Fruit smasher.
Yeah.
I'll smash apples. I'll smash pumpkins. I'll smash fucking watermelons. You just watch me.
It's very interesting listening to you say this is what inspires you, or this is what you're very interested. You're fascinated. You're intrigued. That was the word.
Since I was a kid, man.
Yeah. So you got me asking myself, what intrigues me?
Yep.
Outlaws, Hunter S. Thompson, and serial killers.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm pinpointing the kind of passion you're talking about, and then I'm asking myself, in what areas of life do I have that same passion?
Yeah.
And like I would dig like walking into the real house where the real Texas Chainsaw Massacre happened.
Oh,
I don't know, something like that.
Same as myself, man. Same for me. I'm fascinated by everything you just said. I'm also fascinated by that too.
Or I went to the killing fields in Cambodia. Like that shit was fucking raw.
Isn't it crazy when like you see something on TV since you're a kid, or you read about it in a book, and then you actually find yourself there looking at it? Machu Picchu in Peru.
Oh, I never been.
Alcatraz in San Francisco. Bonnie and Clyde's car. The area in Las Vegas where Tupac was shot on Flamingo and Colville. I've been to these places, but these were places I was fascinated with since I was a kid, and I was like, I always imagined myself going and seeing these things, but when I'm actually there, sometimes it's hard to take it in.
Or even Asia, just Asia. Like I was fascinated starting around 15, 16 when I read the Tao Te Ching for the first time.
Yeah.
And the place where we went and took all those pictures, right across the street, the temples, like
that's the temple of Confucius, right?
But I go over there sometimes just to remind myself I'm in Asia, because it's easy to forget because this has become my reality. And when I walk over to those temples, I'm like, dude, I would never see this stuff back home. Nor would my friends, nor would my family.
It's
so
magical.
I try to go over there as a little reminder of how amazing my life is now.
It is. When you step outside your door here, I still have that magical feeling and that magical sense of wonderment, and my imagination goes wild. Just like you said there, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, I get that same feeling here on a daily basis.
Yeah. I was talking to my buddy last night, and he was talking about how he wants to go home, and I was like, for the first time, I feel like I'm already at home. Like I feel fully acclimated, and I feel like this is my home now.
For me, my home was always wherever my mother was.
Yeah,
and
you have a very strong connection with your mother. Not saying I
well,
don't.
Me and my mother have a great relationship, and the way she brought me up, it's like she was very open-minded, and the type of music she listened. My mother was into Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, a guy called Rory Gallagher, the blues music. When people talk about the blues music and they look at me as being a younger guy, and they might say like, "Oh, what do you know about the blues?" And it's like, I can say to them, I was listening to the blues before I was even born. Not before you were even born, before I was even born. They're like, how does that work? And it's like, well, my mother was heavily pregnant with me. She went to see John Lee Hooker. So technically I was listening to the blues before I was even born. So she brought me up with that, and also with, I think, good values of not lying. And we have similar interests. We like a lot of different books, and we talk about books, and I have a great relationship with her. It's great, and I love it. I wish everybody could have the same.
I have to add something right now really quick. You have to give me like 1 minute. I must add this.
Go ahead.
Just you inspire me with the love you have for your mother. And that's not saying I don't have love for my mother. I love my mother very, 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 very much. But it's inspiring. You call your mother your God. And I was reading this book last night, really good book called The Boudin Nights. And it's a trilogy. It's a great book. But in the beginning of the book, he has a quote from Oscar Wilde. This is the quote. Children begin by loving their parents. After a time, they judge them. Rarely, if ever, do they forgive them. And that might not apply to you, but I underlined it the first time I read it. And when I read it again last night, I was like, that is a thing. Maybe not a thing for you, but it's been a thing for me. It's been a thing for a lot of people. Yeah,
and I mean, like, not everybody's the same. Not everybody. I wish everybody could have that relationship with their mother, but I guess some people don't. And that's all depends on how she brought you up, or how you were brought up, even by your father or anything like that. You know what I mean? The connection you can have, but the similarities you have, and it's everybody's different. But that for me,
I've been reading lots of books, so they all just got the wheels fucking turning, man. That was awesome. Thank you very much. You hosted the podcast today. You did a wonderful job. It was very clear. It was very concise. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I always love learning something new, because this is the kind of shit I would never research on my own.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
I like it.
I'd like to do a few more podcasts on things like this, like
I'll think about it.
Ned Kelly's one. I'd like to do one on as well, which I'll tell you about in one podcast.
Cool.
Ned Kelly was awesome. But thanks for everybody for listening. Please follow the Instagram page, support the podcast, and we'd like to give a big shout out and a special thank you to Ninja Ned for providing us with original music for the podcast. If you noticed at the start of the podcast now, we have a bit of an intro tune every so often, and at the end of the podcast, we're going to play a song, a full song. And this song is by Ninja Ned. He's not just a bonsai master, a tea ceremony practitioner.
My girlfriend asked me, or somebody asked me about him, and I said, well, he's a tea drinking kung fu master, bodybuilder, health nut.
Yeah.
But to try to squeeze all those things into one grammatical sentence is very difficult.
And you know what? He's also a phenomenal musician.
Yeah, that was the one thing I just left out.
And creative. So
my girlfriend was like, so he's just good at everything? And I'm like, kinda.
Everything he has a passion for. Like myself.
Right.
People used to always say, oh, you're fucking, you can do everything, you're good at everything. No, I can't. I can barely count to fucking 10. But if it's something I'm passionate about and I have a real interest in, I can succeed and excel in that field. But anyways, long story short, big shout out.
Like our IG.
Yeah. So anyways.
Follow us on Instagram.
Big shout out to Ninja Ned. Thanks for the music you're providing for the podcast. And at the end of each episode, we're going to play a track. You can end the podcast now. Goodbye, have a good day, peace to you. Or you can stay and listen to the song we're going to play. And anybody out there that's listening that has any original music that they'd like to send in, we would be glad to play it on the podcast at the end of the podcast, providing it's none of that mumble rap shit, or anything like fucking K-pop, BTS shit. I'm sorry, but hey, if it's real, comes from the heart, comes from the soul, it's creative, it's good, send it in and we'll listen to it and we'll play it at the end of the podcast. We would love to use this podcast as a platform for other creative people. You know what I mean? So don't be shy.
#babyskin.
Boom!